New to CS5 is the Mixer brush, offering for the first time a way to simulate what happens in real life when you brush onto a wet canvas. To explore this, let's open up a file in our Chapter 14 folder. Open the file Mixer. Notice that I have my Brush Presets panel up on screen. If yours is not open, go to Window and select Brush Presets. Now let's select the Mixer Brush tool. It is located in the Tools panel beneath the Brush tool. So click on Brush and let's select Mixer Brush. Now a couple things here I need to talk about in the options bar. The very first thing we have is a color swatch, and this is called the reservoir. This is the color that you are dipping your paintbrush into. By default, it's set to the foreground color, but we'll take a look at how to change that. To the right, you have two brush icons. This first one, you can toggle it on and off. This is your load icon, and when it's activated, you will be loading your brush between every stroke. In other words, you'll be dipping your brush back into that reservoir of color. To the right of it, we have the clean icon. You can toggle this on and off also. When this is activated, your brush will be cleaned between each stroke. So 2 consecutive strokes will have the exact same mix of colors. We've got a pull-down menu here with a ton of handy presets that we'll get into in a moment. But let's talk about this first parameter here, the wet value. The wet value determines how wet or dry your canvas is. So let's set this to a value of 0. We're going to have a completely dry canvas. We're going to have a load of 100%. Load refers to how much color you're putting onto your brush. So right now we're going to brush on this yellow square with a red paint. Click and drag, and we simply have the normal brush behavior in Photoshop. No big deal. But if we change our wetness to 100%, let's see what happens. Now we'll start painting in this yellow. And now look at what we have. The colors are mixing together because the canvas is wet. Now let's talk about load for 1 second. I'm going to set a wetness of 0 again. And this time for the load, I'm going to set it to a very small value, like 3%. Now let's click and see what happens. If I click here and drag, I'll do it again because you may have missed it. Look at that. I keep dragging the mouse, but the paint runs out because we have a very small load. We did not put a lot of paint on that brush. Next, we have the mix option. Now this is only active when you have a wetness value above 0. So let's set a wetness here of 100. Going to set a medium strength load of 50%. And I'm going to set the mix at 0. When the mix is at 0%, Photoshop is giving ultimate priority to the reservoir color, in this case to the red here. So if I paint on this brown, you can see the red shows up right away, and if I stretch out of that, we're painting with all red. Now let's see what happens if I change the mix to 90%. As the mix increases in percentage, Photoshop gives more weight to the pickup color, the color that is on the canvas. So now if I paint, well, you can see now there's a bunch of brown because you can't even see any red. If I spill out, look at how much of that brown color we're picking up. So mix is a great way to vary the percentage between your reservoir color and the canvas color. Now if we're going to be painting with this reservoir color, how can we change it? Well, you could go and change your foreground color as usual. You could simply click on it and select a new value, but you can also pick up color directly from the canvas. And you do this by positioning the mouse over a color, holding down the Option key on the Mac, Alt key on the PC, and simply click. We can add the yellow here. We could go back to red. Simply Option, Alt, clicking selects the canvas color as your reservoir color. Now there's one very important option under here. Until now I've been using the Load Solid Colors Only option, but I'll turn this off so you can see what it does. And I'll increase the brush size a bit too. If I put the brush over this area and Option click on the Mac, Alt click on the PC, notice what my reservoir color looks like. It is picking up all the color sampled by the size of my brush. So I'd be painting with yellow mixed with red up at the top. If you don't want that behavior, simply turn this back on, select Load Solid Colors Only. Now if I Option Alt click in that same location, I have a solid patch of yellow. So far we've just been making squiggles, but I'll show you a quick application of this tool. Let's open up a file in our Chapter 14 folder, and this time we'll choose Guanajuato 2. Alright, I'll zoom in here at 100% view. We'll go up to the top. What we want to do here to this illustration is add a little sun to it. Now I'm going to go down and choose a more artsy kind of brush for this one. I think I'll choose something like this. And I'll increase the brush size just a bit. And now I'm going to use our preset list. I want to have a very wet brush, so I'm going to choose Very Wet. This gives me a wet value of 100, a load of 50%, and a mix of 50%. I'm not going to paint directly on the background layer. It's always, always, always a good idea to paint on a layer. That way you can always undo your changes in the future. So in the Layers panel, let's click the Add Layer button. And we're going to paint on layer 1, but we want this mixer brush to interact with the background layer. So we're going to turn on Sample All Layers. And now we'll make a little sun. Not too bad. You can see the colors mixing because of the wet canvas, so we at least have a little more natural painterly-like look. But suppose we think that sun came in just a bit too bright to match the rest of the image. Well, here's what painters would do. Van Gogh and Monet would do a wet into wet painting, and that is exactly what we are going to do. I'm going to click on our reservoir color. That brings up the color picker, and I'm going to choose a yellow that is just less bright, something down about here, and I'll select OK. Now what I want to do is paint over that brighter yellow with the darker yellow and let those colors mix nicely. So what I'm going to do is lower my wet value because I want this to be fairly subtle. I'll set that to 30%. My load is going to be very small. I don't want to overpower the existing yellow. I'll set that to 5%. And I'm going to set my mix fairly high at 85. This will weight this heavily towards the canvas color. And now I'm going to just gently paint over this. And so what I'm doing here is just getting a nice darker shade of yellow by painting on a wet canvas. I'll open up the history panel and you can see the before and after. Here's with our first bright yellow, and now we've toned it down a bit. So the mixer brush is a brand new addition to CS5, and if painting is your thing, you're going to want to spend a lot of time with this tool.